Good to see so many people here tonight. This is great. On behalf of the building committee, thank you for coming tonight. We are excited for tonight here, and we're excited in the direction that Trinity is heading in. As Simon said, my name is Eric Reif. I'm a member of the building committee here at Trinity. I was told I have to turn this on now. Bingo. All right, so here's our agenda for tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit, hopefully briefly, about how we've gotten to this point in time and the entities that have been part of the process. This is just looking at the faces I'm seeing here tonight. That's going to be a review for most of you, but for some of you, this will be new stuff since we've talked in previous presentations. I'll also talk a little bit about the goals for our facility and things that we've come up with that need to be fixed here. And then after that, we'll get to the good stuff, the meat and potatoes of the presentation, if you will. And for that, we've invited Brian Berg from Zerr Berg Architects, our design team that we've brought on board, to present their findings from the facility assessment study they did and to present the process undertaken thus far in coming up with some conceptual design plans for our building. I also want to thank Brian for helping me prep the slides tonight. You notice they're a little more professional looking than they have been in the past, and that's a good thing. And then after that, we'll have some time for discussion and I believe a motion from council, as Simon said. So going way back, if you remember back in 2015, that's almost 3 years ago, we did a church assessment tool survey, or CAT scan we called it. That was basically a survey. You filled out a bunch of questions, and we rated ourselves on how we perceive we do things here at Trinity. And this slide is one of them that was brought up, I believe, in the 2020 Vision Team presentation and proposal. So as you can see up there, we rated what we did well and what we didn't do well. We rated well vitality, music, education, and we had some areas we needed some improvement on, with the big one with a bullet there being hospitality. So the 2020 Vision Team was created by Council to examine and interpret the data collected from the CAT scan. There we go. 2020 Vision Team identified 6 priorities that come out of that. They were to reach and incorporate new people into the life of the church, develop spiritual generosity to financially support our mission, develop members equipped for ministry and leadership, attract families with children and youth to our church, develop ministries that work toward healing those broken by life circumstance, and create more opportunities for people to form meaningful relationships. The 2020 Vision Team then further went on to recommend 4 strategic initiatives to address these priorities. One was to create a culture of authentic hospitality. Second was to develop an effective governance structure. Third was to improve and enhance the use of technology here at Trinity. And the fourth was to improve and enhance our facility. Implementation of these 4 initiatives came in the form of creating task forces, or dream teams as we called them. Each team had objectives assigned to them, consisted of 10 to 12 members each, and met for about a year from 2016 to 2017. The goals for these teams were different, but yet somewhat intertwined with some overlap. Tonight we're going to focus on the facility team because that's what we're talking about, the building tonight. But know that all 4 groups, all 4 dream teams had contributions and input as far as what this facility needs, how it needs to improve, if you will. So the facility team was specifically assigned to reach 4 of those 6 priorities. The reach include new people, spiritual generosity, open and welcoming facility, and opportunities for fellowship. So in the 2020 proposal, the facility team was charged with some rather ambitious goals that, well, frankly, weren't really achievable with volunteer hours. But they did lay the roadmap for getting us started here. And what the facility team actually had done was the very first steps of a building design process. Any typical project, building project that goes on has a very typical progression, or 5 basic steps, and you see them on the screen there. Pre-design, schematic design, design development, construction documents. What the facility team engaged in was essentially the first stage of that, which is the pre-design process. And so you say, what is pre-design? Pre-design involves a site analysis and understanding our constraints. We'll get back to constraints in a few minutes here. Defining the needs of the church, or what does our ministry needs. We had lots of discussions about what Trinity could be. We spent time discussing what Trinity needs to be successful and sustainable into the future. We studied project feasibilities, how the programs fit and the scale of any project that we would do here. We set long-term goals for a project, and we anticipated some obstacles that may come up. What it all came down to, though, at the end of the day, is the facility team basically had, I think I was, sorry, new clicker. Basically came down to two conclusions. One is portions of our campus here have outgrown their functional usefulness. And then secondly, we need to rearrange our spaces for the next generation. As you know, education, worship, outreach programs are very different today than they were in years past when most of our structures were built here. So the areas that needed improvement were all broken down and categorized, and we coined them as the 5 building-related constraints to ministry. And if you've read our updates and bulletins and messengers and previous things, you've seen these before. But we'll take a couple minutes and go through each one, as these are the goals we're trying to solve here with this process. They are deferred maintenance, facility security, improving existing space utilization, improve entry circulation and wayfinding, and developing essential gathering space. All right, number 1, deferred maintenance. This is probably the most obvious of the 5. We must address years of deferred maintenance here so we can remain safe, comfortable, intact, and sustainable in the future. As everybody knows, there are many deferred maintenance items that need to be addressed here. And from a hospitality standpoint, these items don't give a good first impression to visitors, guests, and prospective new members. Facility team thought it was important that we maintain a holistic view during this process. Just addressing deferred maintenance doesn't solve the other 4 issues we have. So any proposed solutions or anything we do here needs to address multiple items. Second item is comprehensive building security plan. This one is probably the most straightforward of the 5 items. We need to address total facility security so staff, members and visitors and other user groups are safe. This is more than just doors and cameras. We have many narrow corridors and corners, hiding spots, creepy spaces, if you will. But facility team felt it was important to balance having a secure facility with being warm and inviting. We can promote improved hospitality also through having warm, friendly spaces and natural light, which naturally improves security as well. You will notice that some of these have already begun being implemented with the buzzers on the door out front here, but there's a lot more we can do towards that. The third constraint is improving existing space utilization. Many areas of our building are well past their useful life. In other words, they're functionally obsolete. Current program requirements are very different than they were 60 years ago when the core parts of our church over there were built. Large areas of the building today are underutilized. We have many spaces that are used only once a week for 1 hour, with really no opportunities to share that space and get more usage out of them. On the flip side of that, we have some spaces that have overly high demand. This creates schedule conflicts that limit the ability and impacts the ministry. Think of the CLC here, think of the lounge, think of places we always do stuff in. Fourth item, improved entry, I've said that wrong when I practiced this too. Circulation and wayfinding. Our current building is a maze of crooked corridors and turns. It's difficult to navigate. We have many different levels, sub-levels, making it very inaccessible. It's difficult for our members to navigate. If you've taken tours, you've probably noticed this. I was a little bit dirty when I took you on tours because I kind of purposely took you up, down, and around to facilitate a little bit. But there's no good way to get from A to B in this building. From a hospitality standpoint, when you think about that now, it's nearly impossible for visitors, guests, and new members to find their way. Now, related to that is a main entry. If you're a guest coming to the building, we need a main entry that's distinct and welcoming to the public, where we currently have none. When you think of how the community sees Trinity, they see us from 8th Street there, making kind of this our pseudo front entry. And the last item, develop a central gathering space. This is related to number 4 too. A centralized gathering space and fellowship space would provide a focal point for entry and activity. This space would be a unifying element between the sanctuary and the CLC. It would serve as a prominent reception area with a focused point of entry. So coming in from 8th Street, see a main entry into a central reception area. Or think of it as a hub, if you will. You come into the building, you always know where you're at. If you're in the hub, you go here, you go here, you go over here, rather than like this now. And the next point here is kind of a new point, but if you think about it, we're kind of an introverted building here. We don't have much connection with our neighborhood or where we are in the community. There's no way to see into this building, whereas if we had a prominent central gathering space, people could see into here, see into Trinity, not be intimidated by it, and see the mission we're putting forth here. Yeah, I kind of likened it to, we have a lot of brick walls, and we're kind of like a fort in some ways. Ooh, there we go. All right. So facility team ultimately made 3 recommendations. One was to form a building committee, which council acted on and did here this past summer in 2017. You can see our pretty pictures up there on the screen, but the building committee is Shelley Simonson Alvin, Dee Pretty, Erica Barnett, Frank Pierce, Kurt Casper, myself, Pastor Simon Fensom, and Matt Lyseth. The second recommendation was to engage professional design services to lead us through a detailed facility assessment and to provide schematic designs, concepts, and plans for our building here. If you remember back to our congregational meeting we had last May, we voted on that to spend up to $25,000 or whatever it was to secure these services, and that was approved. Now, the building committee's role in this is to represent Trinity Lutheran as a direct point of contact with the design team. We're here to steer the process towards meeting Trinity's goals and needs. We lead the discussion and make decisions with council's oversight and direction. And what that means is council holds the purse strings. The building committee doesn't have any authorization to spend any money or that sort of thing. That's all coming from council still. The building committee also led the process in selecting the design team. We put together a request for proposals, interviewed design firms, and ultimately selected Zerr Berg Architects to provide those services to us. And the last 2 items there are similar in that the building committee is also responsible for creating checkpoints in this process or getting input from the congregation and make sure that we're always on the right track. And that's part of the reason why we're here tonight, is this is another one of those checkpoints to see how we're doing and make sure we're on the right track. So since last November when we secured Zerr Berg's services, the building committee has been working with them and steering the project towards meeting Trinity's goals to finding solutions to those 5 building constraints. We've had roughly 8 meetings over the last 3+ months, had a number of good creative sessions with a number of hard choices to make. And that essentially brings us to the here and now of where we're at, another checkpoint. So at this time, I would like to invite Brian Berg from Zerr Berg Architects to come up. Brian is going to present the findings from a facility assessment study and some conceptual solutions to our constraints. So, Brian?
Thanks, Eric. Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Berg, as Eric mentioned, with Zerr Berg Architects, and it's been a pleasure to work with many people within the Trinity family, not just the building committee, but also people ranging through your entire depth of your ministry here, and to really learn and get educated about what it is that Trinity Lutheran Church does in this community and beyond this community. And it's pretty remarkable. You guys should be very proud of the impact that you have in this community and elsewhere. You are one of the iconic church buildings in Moorhead. I'm sure you're all aware of that. You don't need me to tell you that. and it's a vibrant faith community. And as an architect, I really enjoy working with churches, and it's one of our core areas of practice. We do a lot of schoolwork and we do a lot of church work. And I really enjoy working on church projects. I've worked on a number of large church projects in the community here. We were the project architect for the St. Anna Joachim Church in South Fargo, down by Shanley. And we were also I've been a member at Hope Lutheran for 25 years. And we were very involved in the South Campus, the creation of the entire South Campus there after the first building was built back in the early 90s. Pretty much everything after that point we've been involved in. So we really enjoy the process of learning about a church's ministry and helping a congregation vision what sorts of space needs get paired with those ministries. And so I'm going to take you through an assessment, just a talk here, probably about 20 minutes, and I'm sure we're going to have time for some questions at the end of this. But I want to talk through the process that we went through to generate some ideas to start the dialogue about what your facility might look like going into the future. And I think we were given some tasks, some very specific tasks that relate back to those 5 areas of focus that the building committee presented to us. And I just want to go over these really quick to just give you kind of a little bit of grounding of what our task was as we started to work through that vision process. So the design team charged us as architects and as engineers when we were looking at your building to identify and resolve current facility ministry constraints. So we looked at all areas of your ministry. We really dove into the meat and potatoes of the things that you do here at Trinity and talked about what sorts of facility needs you have in order to accomplish those goals and to look into the future and see what sorts of things might be needed 5-10 years down the road as well. We were asked to provide an outside, objective, and professional perspective to problem solving. That's really what we do as designers. We're problem solvers. I hope that's what we're doing. And I think being objective and coming at it from an outside point of view helps us to the extent that we're just able to have a fresh set of eyes to put on things. Probably the biggest thing that we're going to talk about here, and I'm going to get into detail in a couple minutes, is your deferred maintenance issues. And I'm going to talk about what that means, but we have a mechanical and electrical engineer working with us, and we were asked to assess your building systems and to evaluate options for mechanical, electrical, life safety systems, the building envelope, windows, roof, all of those sorts of things, and with the goal of providing you with solutions that give you a more cost-effective building to operate going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. We also, as we met with all of your ministry groups, we developed a comprehensive overview of those ministries and what the facility needs are for those ministries. A very specific space program that talks about how many square feet you need for each task. And I'll show you what that looks like. I mentioned that we were asked to address your current ministries, but also look at future potential for ministry here and providing flexible space that can address those needs. And then we were asked to provide costs associated with these big picture ideas, kind of big solutions, and to create a schematic concept design that shows what this looks like in the context of your current site. We're not going to show you a completed plan tonight. That's not the purpose of the meeting tonight. We're going to show you some ideas of what could happen on this site and how you might be able to rearrange some spaces to meet your current and future ministry needs. And that's ultimately what our goal is. I thought it was really great what Pastor Simon was saying earlier about how awesome your outreach is into this community. And this is a slide that we talk about a lot when we do church planning. Church planning, as we see it, and it's not just us, this is kind of a universal language for church planning, talks about the three-legged stool of worship, fellowship, and education. And we always have added kind of a fourth piece to that of outreach, because I think congregations that aren't actively involved in mission outside of their walls die on the vine. And so I think it's really important to understand how your building can impact that. And Eric mentioned just a little bit ago about this, the introverted nature of your existing building here. And I think there's some things that we can explore that can give you a presence in the community that's a little bit more welcoming and inviting. And so balancing those three things, those three main kind of inward focal points, and then seeing how they can impact that outreach is really an exciting thing. So the first question that we ask whenever we start talking with a church with a new project is, does your built space reflect and enhance your mission and ministry? And if it doesn't, then we need to figure out what we can do to correct that problem. So there are certain areas of your building here that do a fantastic job of addressing your ministry and mission needs, and there's areas of your church that do not a very good job of addressing those needs. So we've identified a lot of those as we've gone through this process. So Eric mentioned the 5 ministry constraints up here. We're going to talk about a lot of things related to those here. But the process that we went through when we developed this list of program items for you to review was to meet with these groups. There's 8 groups listed up here. We had other meetings with other groups as well, but these are kind of the primary groups that we met with. And we had probably an hour to hour and a half meeting with each of those. Some of them we had more than one meeting with. And we talked through current needs, where maybe there are some shortcomings in the facility related to their needs, and how we could address those. And maybe talked a little bit of dreaming about what could happen with that ministry in the future. And it was really a very informative process. And it helped us develop a building program to inform the design and to use as a tool as we talked about square footage and what the requirements are to meet your current ministry needs. So there you can see kind of over the top of this slide the way that your church is currently laid out related to worship and education. And right now, you've got your administration area kind of right in this middle here. There's very little kind of connection right now between your primary worship spaces, the sanctuary over here, and the CLC that we're in, and gathering and fellowship that kind of should be a hub of activity in that center, a place that's a focal point for those things to come together to provide pre-function fellowship before and after worship, fellowship after a celebration or celebration space. And so you can really kind of start to see when you look at this layout here what is happening on the site. Over here you have education, you have the existing wing over there that has much of the administration space in it right now. And you also have some space, the addition that was done at the same time as this building back here, the Christian Life addition, that has the youth room, and then has the really underutilized choir space that's in the lower level. I know you can't read this, so it's not there for the purpose of having something for you to read. It's there to just to show you the level of depth of information that we developed as we went through this. There are some things that are highlighted here, and I'll read them for you, the ones that are a little bit larger. So this first block of spaces up here has to do with narthex and gathering area and a new entry. So there's about 4,500 square feet that's in that module up there. The next piece is fellowship, and that includes hospitality, fellowship, kitchen, storage for the kitchen, and for fellowship for tables and chairs. There's about 5,800 square feet there. The next piece is your administrative offices. Your administration is kind of spread out a lot right now, and right now there's really no kind of gatekeeper to the administrative area. The offices for pretty much everybody are accessible right off the common hallway, and so We were asked to take that and maybe provide a little bit more focus to that, provide a little bit more security for the people that are working in the office, and to provide a main point of entry for that office where you have some control and some security there. So there's about 6,000 square feet of office space when you start looking at the offices for all the pastoral staff, for all the administrative staff, for all the music and liturgy staff, for everybody that's for the education staff, for everybody that works here within these walls that needs office space. Some of those offices are gathered together into more common office areas. Some of them are private offices, so there's a little bit of everything in there. But we had very detailed discussions with the folks that would be in those offices about exactly what they need. And in many cases, the office space that we came up with as a solution was smaller than the spaces that they're in right now, because the spaces aren't laid out as well as they could be, and they're using spaces that are there because they're there, not because they're the right size or in the right spot. So the next piece up here is the preschool. And the preschool, you're going to see as I walk you through this, that the preschool is kind of a linchpin of this entire discussion. Right now, your preschool, as you all know, is in the basement. It's in the basement in an area that doesn't meet Minnesota rules for preschools. You can't have a preschool in a basement. Some of you may not know that, but you can't have that, and you're in there right now because you're grandfathered in there, and it's really not an appropriate location for a preschool, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's about 10,000 square feet, a little over 10,000 square feet that's associated with the preschool. So it's the largest block of space that we're talking about. It's a very vibrant and a tremendous part of your ministry here, but it's definitely underserved by the location that it's in. So that's one where the building is certainly a hindrance to what could be there. They do a fantastic job with what they have, but sometimes I think it's hard to see how they can really function down there in a really effective way. The next block of space here is children's ministries. There's a little over 7,000 square feet there, and we've got basically large group rooms, so moving away from the smaller individual classrooms like we have on the second floor of the two buildings here, and moving more towards a large multi-use type of a space that has the ability to be used for other things other than the children's ministries as well, to just give you more flexibility. And then the last piece down here is the youth space. And the youth space here is roughly 2,500 square feet of space, including their lounge and a small kitchenette and things like that. A little bit of mechanical space there. So when you total up the areas that are in orange here, the 3 areas that are in orange and the 3 areas that are in red, the orange is things that would need to be on the main floor. Your fellowship would be on the main floor. Because of the preschool function and it's the activities that are there, that needs to be on the main floor. The gathering space, the main entry would be on the main floor. So when you total those things together, there's a little bit, right around 20,500 square feet of space that needs to be on the main floor. The second floor, which includes most of your administration, there's going to be an administrative presence on the main floor because you need that where people are entering, but most of the administration would be on the second floor. And then also the children's ministry area and the youth area would be on the second floor. So there's about 15,200 square feet on the second floor. The lower level, this last little piece that's in green here is mechanical space, and that's really all that's down there other than some circulation and connectivity to get down to that lower level. So what we're talking about is if we were to take the entire campus here and you take the CLC, which is a kind of a standalone component here, and the original church, or the 1951 church, and you take those two pieces away, all of the other, so basically taking the worship piece out of the equation, all of the other ministry components that you have here need about 35,700 square feet in order to function adequately on the site. There's some good news with that, because when we went through that process, we discovered that that's about 8,000 or 9,000 square feet less than what you have right now serving those needs. So I'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's a pretty significant reduction in square footage, which also brings with it a significant reduction in operating costs and a significant reduction in construction costs and all of those kinds of things. So we'll definitely come back to that in a minute here. So I'm going to just flip through 3 slides quickly here because I want to show you how these levels are kind of interconnected. So the big yellow bubbles here are the primary levels that you have here at Trinity Lutheran. The red dots are the secondary levels. So when you look through this and you see there's 3 represented there, there's 4 represented there, there's 2 more represented there. You have 9 primary levels that you have to negotiate. Not all of those are accessible. Some of them are completely inaccessible. And the red dots here, when you add the red dots to the 9 that are already there, that's 4 there, 6 there, so that's 10, that's 12. So that's 21 level changes in this footprint, in the building that you have here. That's a tremendous amount of up and down in a building of this size. And it happened for a number of reasons. It happened because the building was added onto over time, and it was added onto at various periods of time when conventions of how people design changed. It was very common, for instance, when the 49 edition, the piece in the center here, when that piece was done, it was very common to have a split level kind of an approach to things. And that sort of drove what happened downstream from there, because other things were built then that had that split level approach. And they not sometimes, the floor to floor height of that original building doesn't really match up with the floor to floor height of the split level on the other building, so there's ramps in there. And there's just a lot of this going on. So it makes the building very difficult to navigate, and we've talked about that already. So you've had this series of building additions that have been built over 70 years, from 49 to 51 to 66 to 78 to 89. And really since 89, when this building was built, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of other than just kind of maintaining the status quo, there hasn't been a lot of change here at Trinity. So what does that mean? What is deferred maintenance? Why are we talking about deferred maintenance? Well, deferred maintenance just means that during that time, the ministry needs here probably got the lion's share of the dollars that were available, which was great because you're growing your ministry, you're outreaching, you're connecting with the community. But some of those maintenance things like mechanical equipment and replacing roofs and replacing windows, some of those things weren't as high a priority. And so as you're growing those ministries, some of these things are just kind of stagnating. And so there's a significant amount of deferred maintenance that needs to be addressed in this building, and I think you're all aware of that. But you may not be aware of what that means in terms of dollars, because it's a significant dollar amount that is impacted by that. So as we went through this process of assessing your building, we talked about the HVAC systems, that's heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, replacing your heating and cooling plant. You've all heard horror stories about your boilers here and how they're on their last leg and how they could go to sleep on you one day and never wake up. And so that's something that definitely needs to be addressed as part of this process. Right now you have pneumatic controls in many areas of the building, most areas of the building, and so replacing those pneumatic temperature controls, which you can't even buy parts for anymore, with an automated digital control system that will allow you to do things like regulate your temperature during periods of time when the building is unoccupied and monitor it off-site and all those kinds of things. That's a huge benefit from the standpoint of just operational management of the building. Plumbing and fixture replacement throughout the building. You've got a lot of plumbing in this building that's very outdated. You guys all know how many bathrooms you have here. Well, maybe you don't know how many bathrooms you have here, because you probably have never counted them, taken the time to count them, but there's a lot of bathrooms in this building. And there's a lot of bathrooms that get very little use. And so there's some bathrooms that are tucked away in places that very rarely get used. And so, and some of those areas have fixtures that are as old as the building. And so, there's just a lot of maintenance that would need to happen on those particular pieces. Building sprinkler, life safety. You have minimal areas of the building that have building sprinkler. And so putting a building sprinkler service into this building, actually you don't have any areas of the building that have building sprinkler. I misspoke. Putting a building sprinkler into this building would have a tremendous impact from a life safety standpoint, also from an insurability standpoint, just going forward, and protecting the asset that you have. You have a huge asset here, and protecting it makes a lot of sense. Replacing lighting controls, replacing voice and data cabling, or adding voice and data cabling where you don't have it. You have power distribution issues in the building. Lots of areas in the building that are very underserved by distribution, and many areas of the building where there aren't any grounded outlets. So the outlets are basically two-wire connections. And then an electrical service that needs to be replaced in a big part of the building. And then finally, the building envelope, window replacement, roof replacement, additional insulation in some places in the building, finish upgrades in areas that haven't had them for many, many, many years. And then the last line item there, we had an asbestos abatement environmental engineer come in and do a comprehensive assessment of the building. There's about $594,000 worth of asbestos that needs to be removed in this building. And much of that is in pipe insulation and in like the ceiling in the sanctuary. The acoustical plaster that's on the ceiling in the sanctuary is asbestos. And because that stuff when it gets wet, it becomes compromised, and you guys all know that you've had issues with moisture in the ceiling there and leaky roofs and things, and so over time that will definitely need to be removed. And so we asked them to come up with a plan for removal and what that would look like. So almost $600,000 of asbestos to remove. So as we went through that whole process and we summarized everything that's in there, and again, you can't read this, and I totally realize that, but this first piece up here has to do with building heating plant things. So replacing your entire heating plant, replacing your electrical service, adding a fire sprinkler service to the building that's not currently here, so that you can provide a fire sprinkler system here. And then upgrading your fire alarm in the building. Your fire alarm in the building in many areas is very, 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 very minimal. So that's the first piece up there. Then the next piece goes by building. So this is the 1949 building and everything that would have to happen there. This is the office and basically the west wing over there and everything that would have to happen there. This is the classroom and choir room addition, so the very south end of the west wing. And then this is the sanctuary, and this is the CLC here. So the CLC probably has the shortest list because it's the newest building. And then some additional site improvement things here that would probably need to happen. When you total all that up and you start to look at replacing mechanical systems basically throughout the existing buildings, we have a total of about $8 to $9 million just in deferred maintenance that would have to happen in this building if you were going to just continue to operate all of your facilities the way that they are right now. And the problem with that is that doesn't address these other 4 issues. It just addresses issue number 1 of the 5 issues. So it kind of paints a little bit of a sobering picture when you look at it this way. And so one of the things that the building committee spent a lot of time talking about is, well, how can we address this issue, this deferred maintenance issue, at the same time as we're trying to address all of these other things that we've been tasked with addressing. So when you look at this slide here and you see these 3 areas that are in orange, those 3 areas that are in orange are about $4.5, almost $5 million. So that's the deferred maintenance for basically the entire west wing and that center space. And I'll come back to that in a second here because it's very relevant. So along with the study of looking at deferred maintenance and assessing your existing infrastructure and your building and everything here, we are also going through that programming process. And so we did what's called a visual program. And so we took a look at your existing buildings here, and we kind of color-coded and did a highlight of each floor and what sorts of program space are being used there. And for the purpose of this exercise, we concentrated on administration, education, and preschool and youth. So kind of those areas, we sort of left the fellowship and worship pieces out of it at this point. And I'll show you what that looks like here. So on this level, which is kind of considered the main level here, it's the sanctuary level that connects up here, and then it comes up the ramp here to this level and comes down the stairs over to here to the Christian Life Center. So it's one level that has 3 levels, but we've got the We've got your primary administration is basically this area here. We've got the Christian Life Center, and we've got the sanctuary. So all of those things are happening on this level. When you go down to you go up to the second level, that is all education space. So all these green rooms here are classrooms that are being used for for basically your education of all the kids at all levels, and they're used for other reasons too. This room here gets used by some other outside groups. And also the youth space over here that's kind of tucked in on the end of the second floor. When you look at the lower level here, we've got the preschool, and you look at the 4-year-olds room here and the 3-year-olds, and you got the large motor skills space out here, the 5-year-olds room here, large playroom there, the preschool and nursery here, got the director's office, the teacher resource room. All these little purple rooms here are all individual toilets, so they're all little one-stall toilets that are kind of scattered around. And then we've got some storage in there. The blue spaces are storage, so you can kind of see what their footprint looks like. Well, what we did was we took the preschool visual program. This is what we call a visual program. So we took those spaces, if you go back to the preschool here, we took these spaces and just kind of deconstructed them. This is what they actually look like on the plan. This is what they look like when you just kind of lay them all next to each other. This is what we came up with when we sat down and we talked with the preschool folks about what they needed. So Kay and her staff, and we talked through what their program looks like today, what they'd like to maybe add to that program in order to increase their numbers a little bit, and what that would look like. So we ended up with a very comprehensive program, developing some relationships between spaces so we'd see what they'd look like. We have a new program net square footage here of about 8,500 square feet, and the existing building net square footage is about 7,100 square feet. So this is the only one that went up, and it went up because there's an increase in the program requirements, so it was logical that it would go up a little bit. The office came down. When you look at you go back to the office slide here, and you look at the office spaces that we have and how they're being used. This is what that office space looks like, and this is what it looks like after you reduce it. So about a 17% decrease in total spaces there once we were able to kind of boil them down to what they really need in order to meet their needs. And there's a little bit of space for growth there too. There's some extra space in there. Children's ministries, we did the same thing, and this is the one that's probably visually is the biggest change, because we're going from all of these little individual classrooms that are very hard to monitor. They require more teachers. They require more individual control. Going to large rooms, so grade 1 and 2 would have a large group room, grade 3 and 4 would have a large group room, grade 5 and 6 would have a large group room, and then they work within those grades within that space. So they're able to do that through how they program the space. Youth ministries was a smaller footprint here, but you can see going from about 1,200 square feet to about 1,600 square feet of net square footage. So the numbers that I showed you before, those were gross square footage. They have a circulation factor built into them to add for walls and corridors and things like that. So this is the slide that really, it kind of slapped the whole group across the side of the head when we saw this, because it really paints a picture that's really, it starts to really solidify everything that we've been talking about all the way up to this point. We've got this block of space for the preschool that's basically 10,000 square feet. And if you remember just a few minutes ago, I said that the things that need to be on that main floor, when you add in the fellowship component, the gathering space, the kitchen, the education, the administrative presence on the first floor, we need about 20,000 square feet on that first floor. Well, you can see that there really is no solution here with the building in its current configuration that you can get all of that stuff on the first floor. So we went from talking about, okay, well, what happens if we take this entire the existing 49 building and a portion of the west wing here, I'll call it, out, and we build on grade in that area. Can we make it fit there? Well, we can do that, but you can see here that just the preschool program alone takes up pretty much 100% of that space. So as we started talking about all of the options, the logical option that we arrived at was that if we're going to develop this to all be on grade, and that's going to be on the same level as the Christian Life Center, and if we're going to develop some sort of a connection that's going to come through here and be our gathering area and this central fellowship space that we talked about, if we're going to do that, that needs to happen in this space. That's the footprint where that needs to happen. So what happens then if we take this and we move it over here and build this on grade? Well, obviously that means that you're taking down the southwest wing as well. That's really the only solution that allows you to put 20,000 square feet of space that needs to be on ground floor, because everything over here right now is a split level. There is no ground floor in this area. You have to go down or go up when you come in the building to get to the spaces that are over here. So we talked about, well, is there a solution where we could move the preschool over to here? Well, you can see, if I pulled this off of here and you could see underneath it, you could see that we would have to increase that footprint of that building by about 30% in order to build that there. And we would have to move the playground over there as well. There's another site over here, there's some space that the church owns over here that there's a little bit of parking in that would work well for a playground to support the activities over here. But the problem with removing the preschool off-site is that it removes that activity that's really vital to the mission and the synergy that happens between the preschool and the church to have it in the building. And if you don't have that preschool in the building, you lose the potential of having those families with young children really feel connected to the building and want to become members and want to have an active engagement here. So I think the committee decided very quickly that this probably is not a solution that's viable to move the preschool over to that existing building. And so if it's not viable to put it over there, and if the preschool is going to continue to be an integral mission of Trinity Lutheran Church, then the only option is to put it over here. And so you can see there was a logical progression that we went through to come to that decision. It didn't happen very quickly, and I know right now you're all kind of drinking from a fire hose because this is the first time that you've heard this. But this is something that over time the building committee has gotten more and more comfortable with, and I think it leads itself to a logical solution. But it does require that you remove a fairly significant part of your existing building. So if everything's going to be on this site, and I mentioned earlier about the two different areas of the building that were color-coded differently. The more expensive portion, the portion that has about $4.5 to $5 million of deferred maintenance, is everything in this darker roof and everything down here. So if you take that $4.5 to $5 million of deferred maintenance and take that off the table, because that portion of the building is going to be torn down, then all of the things that come with that building, all of the level changes, all of the difficulty in navigation, all of the nooks and crannies that make it difficult to operate there, all of those things go with those buildings. And so it allows you to really kind of rethink how your ministry could happen in new space on that footprint. So what we're suggesting is that we wouldn't touch the church here, other than just to make connections to it, and we wouldn't touch the CLC, but basically the rest of the building here would be replaced. So as kind of a control, that number is not the number. So as kind of a control, the committee asked us to take a look at what it would cost to replicate your existing program using the program information that we developed here, so that 37,000 square feet, and then add in basically replicating this building and replicating the sanctuary somewhere else on a green field somewhere where you'd have lots of parking and maybe in South Moorhead somewhere. Obviously there's some major issues with that you're all very aware of, and nobody's suggesting that this is the right idea, but they wanted to understand, okay, what is the value of what we have here? What is the value of that sanctuary? So when we started to talk about the square footage, basically right now you have about 77,000 square feet in this entire facility. When we went through that programming exercise and we talked about what's here and what's at the sanctuary, you have about 67,000 square feet that we would need to replicate somewhere else. So about 10,000 square feet less, which is a really good thing to kind of realize. We're trying to be more economical with space. We're trying to have space that's more multi-use in its nature so that you can share usages with other things, easier to schedule, all of those kinds of pieces that go with it. But when you look at rebuilding that sanctuary that you have right now and trying to do it today with the way that we build today, that would be a very expensive sanctuary to reconstruct, and that is kind of obvious on its face value. But just the sanctuary alone would be probably in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million to replace just that worship space. So, and it's not that big. I mean, it's only about 8,000 square feet, so it's not a tremendously huge sanctuary, but it's because of the way it's detailed, because of the high volume, because of the beautiful ornate woodwork that's in there and the metalwork that's in there. All of those things would be very difficult to recreate. So we tried to put a number to that, and this is what we came up with. Based on square footage and based on a 67,000 square foot church that averages about $271 a square foot. Just for construction costs, raw costs alone is $18.3 million. Then you add in some design fees and a design contingency. Then the other piece is that you don't have any land right now to build that on. So somewhere you'd have to get land to build it on. And just at land costs the way they are today, if you were going to get 8 to 9 acres out there, that's probably somewhere between $1 million, $1.25 million, somewhere around there. Removing and relocating your existing organ, certainly a piece of your history that you would not want to have go away. And so taking that out of that building and relocating it is a big expense. And then just talking about the other things you would need to equip and outfit that church. So looking at about 23 and a quarter, and then as you escalate that over time here, looking forward to maybe 2020, it's right around 25 million. So you have a tremendous asset here that you want to protect. So then we started talking, and I mentioned that we're not going to go to a ton of detail and plan here, but what we want to show you is what this looks like just kind of in the big picture, and what some of the things that could be developed further as we look towards that meeting in May that we're going to talk about at the end of the gathering here. So when you look at the two pieces that would remain, the sanctuary and the Christian Life Center, and you look at that fellowship hub in the center, and look at everything else that needs to happen on this floor, that ground level addition is about 22,000 square feet. The preschool takes up this much square footage, so it's a big area. Having the preschool up in this area allows you to have a really prominent front door inside the building. It also allows you to have a prominent front door for them for an entrance off of the street to the west. So they can have kind of their own identity. It can be secured after hours. But when it's in the building like this, you can still use it for your early education Sunday school. You can't do that if it's across the street. You can't march a bunch of little kids across the street over there, so you'd have to replicate that space in the building if they were to move. And so that was one of the main reasons that the committee really felt strongly it needed to be here. So the biggest problem that we had to solve with this was how to deal with the level changes. And I'm not going to go into a ton of detail with this because it's fairly complicated. But when you walk in the main door here, you would walk through this gathering space. You would have a visual of going up some stairs here to a landing up here that would become an extension of the sanctuary narthex, basically. The elevator is right here, so one elevator to serve every level instead of 2 elevators to serve every level. We're going from 9 levels with about 11 sub-levels or 12 sub-levels to basically 3 primary levels. So we're eliminating a lot of this up and down and wayfinding issues that you have. And part of that is by creating this gathering and fellowship area right in the center here that has this connectivity to your worship and connectivity to education. And the education happens on the 2nd floor up here, directly above the preschool. And right in this area here is where your administration is on the 2nd floor. So the lower level administrative presence would be here. And you would have this space to circulate with this large fellowship and gathering area in between the two worship spaces that would allow you to circulate openly and freely and not have all of this, this congestion that you have right now. One of the things that we've looked at in a little bit more detail, and we're going to continue to develop, is this idea of taking away the introverted nature of your building, and so opening it up a little bit to the public. And so along this east side here, where the new main entry would be, right here, I'm going to back up a little bit, we would have, this would be, there would be a lot of glass on this side. So as you drive by in the evening, a big meeting like this tonight where you have 150 people in the room, people would be driving by and they'd see that activity, they'd see the light kind of spilling out of the building, and they'd think, wow, that's pretty cool, maybe I should check that out and see what's going on there. So that's kind of the idea with having the building be a little bit more connected to the fabric of the community and not quite so inwardly focused like it is right now. The lower level has a connection to get into a space that would be repurposed down here. So instead of having that activity area that is currently down there for the preschool, we would capture that space as two large meeting rooms with a circulation spine that happens along the south side, and there would be a big opening in the wall right here, so you would go from that main level gathering down these steps and you would pop in right here and you would have access to this whole lower level. And so these two large meeting rooms are about 1,200 square feet each. They're quite large, so that would be kind of your multi-use space. Adult education, community outreach, all of those kinds of things could happen in there, and they'd be done in a way where they're much more accessible, much more visible, they're well lit, they have a visible connection to the main level circulation, so you don't feel like you have to go downstairs and around corners to get to them. And then finally, the upper level addition here and the administrative offices. So we have our upper level is about 13,600 square feet, give or take, and we've got a landing up here, the elevator again, and the stairs that are going up to that level from this landing. So this would be open to below along here. So this would be kind of a large, grand entry area. The reason for keeping that a large volume along there is so that we can protect these windows on that side of the church, on the south side of the church. We want to make sure that we're going to continue to get natural light in there. So we have some strategies for how we would do that and how we would structure this in order to make that work. And those are all things that we're continuing to develop with the committee as we continue to meet. And as we move towards having this feasibility study for the financing of the project, and as we move towards having the kind of the meeting in May, where we're going to have a little bit more of a fully developed plan to share with you at that point, we'll continue to do that over the next few months. So this is a budget summary of the project, and you can see here we're talking about a project that's in the range of $13 million to $15 million, which is a lot less than $23 million to $25 million, obviously. Still a big project. And there are some ways that this could be strategized to do some phasing and things. We've talked a little bit about that. But when you take away the deferred maintenance off of the three big pieces that would be removed, and you still have deferred maintenance in the sanctuary. We still have to deal with the asbestos that's in there. We still have to deal with the mechanical deficiencies in that building. We still have to get building sprinkler into these buildings, because when we're doing a renovation that is this comprehensive, assembly spaces now have to be sprinkled. We don't have any option. There's no code option to not sprinkle assembly spaces anymore. And so a space like this and a space like the sanctuary have to be sprinkled. And if you're going to do a project of this magnitude, the code officials are going to make you sprinkle them. So that's not an option kind of a thing. That's a have to kind of a thing. So, but we feel as we've gone through this process, it's been very comprehensive. We've reduced the overall building area by about 9,000 square feet. And we've eliminated really the most problematic areas in the building related to level changes and small rooms that are underutilized or don't fit your current program needs. Those pieces have been taken away. And so really we've tried to, as best we can, working with the committee to address all 5 of those key areas of building deficiencies that needed to be addressed. So again, you know, we've got a model of one of the first things that we did when we started working on this. We developed a model of your existing building in a program called SketchUp, and we used that to kind of visualize some of this stuff. There's going to be a time for us to share that with you. We're not going to do that tonight, but it really helps paint the picture even further of what these level changes mean and how they can all be addressed kind of with one fell swoop here. So that's the extent of what we have to show you here today. And again, there's going to be lots more to come. There are details to the plans that I've shown you today that have been shared with the building committee that we've started to work through, but they still need to have more thought go into them before they're going to be ready to be shared in a form like this. And so as we get to the point where we're ready to do that, we'll rely on the building committee to really advise us on how that's going to happen and what the appropriate time and place is for that. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or I think what the intent here is that they're going to actually call for the motion and then the second, and then they're going to ask for discussion. So I'll have Allison come back up and take care of that.
Thank you, Brian. That was awesome. That's a lot of information. You guys are you spinning? And you're like, 20 minutes? My gosh. Just teasing. That is a lot of information. What we would like to do, they have done a ton of work, the building committee and Zerr Berg, and we are very thankful. We think it's money well spent if we get to the bottom line and we're like, okay, we'll just handle our deferred maintenance. That might be a decision the way we go. If we go the route to do some, to tear down the middle and the wing and do the 13 to 15, or if we buy some land somewhere and $25 million later we are in a cornfield somewhere, however we determine we're going to go, but know that the research all those options have been thoroughly reviewed. And no stone has been left unturned, no thought of, what if we try this? What if we try that? They have covered it all. So at this point, what we would like to do is to call for a motion, it is up on the screen, to hire a capital campaign consultant to conduct a financial assessment feasibility study, which is a feasibility study for our congregation, paid for by a grant from the foundation. So if you recall, the foundation grant was $20,000 towards a feasibility study. Do I have anybody who would like to call that motion?
I would so move.
Thank you. Your name, sir? Jerry Protexter, thank you. Second by Gary Olson. Okay, let's have some discussion. Pastor Matt has a microphone. Any questions?
Quick question, just as you looked, did you assess parking and the situation with our parking lots and how that would fit into it, or would it kind of just be like
We
it is?
definitely looked at your existing parking and looked at what you have for existing spaces. Because of your location in the zone that you're in, there is no requirement for spaces on site to the extent that you need spaces, obviously. You need places for people to park, but generally when you're an urban church like you are that's kind of in a neighborhood like this, the requirements for parking that are put on you are less than a church that's maybe built on a greenfield site somewhere. So we did look at ways that we could improve the parking situation with the space that you have on this site. We've got a site plan that addresses that and addresses maybe a little bit better circulation in front of the building and a better drop-off area and just kind of improving the aesthetic of that whole area too, so that it's not kind of the hodgepodge that it is right now of stuff there with the house that's in the middle and all that. So we have looked at that, and obviously the building the property that you have to the south and to the northwest, those two pieces are also part of that. And so, as we get further into this, we'll quantify everything. But short of getting additional property somewhere, your parking kind of is what it is at this point. So. Yeah, they called for discussion, so. What's that?
Yes, it is. Yep, we're discussing the motion.
George Larson. I'm wondering what's being done with the entrances to the church on the west side, on the 7th Street side
Sure.
of the church.
Yeah, just briefly, the entrance that's on the west side there will be reconfigured. You'll enter in roughly the same location that you enter right now, but it'll be reconfigured with a larger lobby on the main level that will allow you to transition inside with an elevator as part of that lobby. So instead of having that separate elevator that you have right now with the separate little vestibule that's kind of a little bit of an odd experience for somebody to use because you don't actually come into the building before you use the elevator, that elevator would go away. It currently sits right there. And this is the new elevator. So you would come inside in these doors here into a lower level kind of a vestibule and an entry that has access to that elevator that is a split level elevator. So it gets you up to the sanctuary level and down to the lower level of the sanctuary. And it also gets you from the ground level to the second floor of the building addition. So it's one elevator that does the job of the two that you have right now. Yep.
What about the steps that lead up to the entrance just on the west of the sanctuary?
Oh, the sanctuary steps are going to stay the way they are. At least that's the direction that we've been given at this point. So we would provide an accessible entry right here that gets you into the elevator that basically brings you up to that narthex level. So it's a fairly direct path to the narthex, but I think there's some fairly significant concerns about trying to, and really there's not space to do it, to try to add something on to that side, and it would really dramatically change the entry elevation, even though it's on the west side there, the entry elevation of your church, and it's kind of an iconic visual that you have there right now, and it's adding something to that to deal with accessibility there in that spot. It would solve one problem, but it wouldn't solve the other issues of accessibility for the other parts of the building. So that's why we chose to do it in that central location instead of at the church entrance.
Something that I'm really aware of because we're in the funeral business and we work in churches all over town, is that you need to have a central restroom that is big enough that it can be cleaned and kept
Absolutely.
clean. These little ones are just trashed all the time here.
Absolutely, and that's why this is right here. It's right at the hub. It's on the main circulation space. It's prominent right outside the entry to the worship space. It's on both levels at the same location, so it's easy to find. And that one set of toilets there kind of replaces a lot of the scattered small single toilets that you have all over the place in the building. We have other banks of toilets as well. There's one in the education area, and there's one down in the preschool, and there's one that's going to be down in that lower level of the sanctuary down on this end here. But we're consolidating those into large toilet groups instead of all these individual rooms.
Will you be taking out the chapel area overflow?
Yes, good question. So yeah, this area right here becomes part of that gathering space. The windows that are in the chapel are going to be salvaged and are going to be reused in another location. We've talked about some opportunities where that might happen, but that's still up in the air a little bit. But yeah, the chapel overflow area becomes part of that gathering space main circulation spine there. There's one behind you back there, I think.
Hi, Eric Johnson again. I don't actually have a question. I just want to say, commend the committee, the building committee and the council and your firm for considering a variety of options. I really appreciate walking us through that. And there's a lot of work to be done, not the least of which is the feasibility study to assess what we can, what we're willing to afford, what we're willing to do to give to make this happen. There are things that we are going to wonder about, little favorite pieces of the building that we have, I suppose, that some might come and some might go. But I have to say I'm very excited. And I hope that in the midst of this conversation about the details that others feel the same way. This is this could really transform us in a really lovely way, preserving our great sanctuary, connecting to this great CLC, and really bringing us together and opening us up in a really, I think, fantastic way. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm jacked.
Thank you.
Beth Postma, you had mentioned phasing. What would be the prospect, what would be the dislocation for 18-month, 2-year construction for the preschool?
That's a great question. Well, that's a detail that hasn't been fully ironed out yet, but obviously you can see this is a disruptive project. There's no question about that. One of the options that we've kind of talked about is that this could happen in such a way where this part of the building could potentially be used while the center area is constructed. So the easier piece to relocate would, for a short period of time, would be the administration. There's some things that we could do administratively, with temporary facilities that we could pull in or maybe use the house as some temporary office space, or some things we could do like that. There would be some potential to use the upper levels here on a temporary basis for portions of the preschool. We still have to work through that. Obviously, if you're tearing out that whole center section, the preschool goes away. But the lower level of the sanctuary is still available. We need to look at how this could be done in a phased manner. I think that realistically, you're probably talking about a project that's about 16 to 18 months here. So, because you're going to start construction right away in the spring. Most of that first summer is going to be demolition and getting foundations in for the areas that are going to happen that first summer. If you phase this into 2 major components, that extends the duration of the project, and so the suffering gets extended a little further. But you might be able to keep more things on site and intact during that time. So we're going to have to sit down with Kay and talk through the implications for the preschool on how they could continue to operate on the short term. There may have to be a short-term relocation during some portion of the project where maybe a half a year has to happen off-site somewhere in order to really make this work. So we'll continue to discuss that and to work through those challenges. But as long as, I think, if that is the direction that we go, as long as we keep our eye on the ball of what the end result is, and if the families that have their kids in those programs understand what a transformative thing this could be for that space, I think people will be willing to live with some hardship for a year to get to that point. But those are discussions we'll certainly continue to have with the committee. It's a great question, though.
2 quick questions. I guess I'm concerned when you talked about the across the street for a playground for the kids. Mm-hmm. I really don't like the idea of kids having to cross the street to go play. That was one thing. The other thing is, what are you doing with this area out here?
The area out there gets smaller, so it's not big enough to house your playground. There's only, when we're done, and that's, obviously I have the same concerns. The having the kids cross the street to use the playground isn't ideal, but it happens at daycares and preschools all over Fargo-Moorhead. And as long as it's done, I think what we talked about doing is talking with the city about putting a protected crosswalk directly in line with that exit that comes out the back here. So the kids would come out right here, and there could be a protected crosswalk that brings them across the street directly over there with a flashing yellow light that would, and maybe even a speed table on there to get people to slow down. And just, there's that area, this street over here has some traffic on it, but it's not a huge amount of traffic. I mean, it's mostly, there's some kids that run back and forth going, to school on it. There's, you have a lot of traffic when people are leaving church here on that road, but during the weekday, when those kids would be going to recess or going to their outside playtime, I think it could be controlled in a way where it would be safe. We just need to make sure that we have those discussions with the city and see what we can do to maximize the safety of the kids.
What about the balconies in the sanctuary? I presume they're untouched. And then what about the little yellow building?
Correct.
Friends over here?
Yeah, we've talked about possible strategies for making the balconies accessible. The ones that are on the transepts up in the front, to make those accessible would require some sort of an elevator on that side. And once you get up there, they're tiered then. So how, making them accessible maybe gives you access to the front row unless you completely rethink how they're used. So I think that's a little bit of a challenge when you have balconies that are tiered like yours are. We've talked about the possibility of having a connection that gets you to the balcony side, or to the main balcony, the balcony on the west end, using the elevator. So if that elevator went up and went to the primary level there, you'd have the ability to use that to get up there, basically going through the bell tower the same way that you go through the bell tower down below. So it's a possibility, but it's not something that we've explored extremely thoroughly at this point. So.
And another question was about the yellow house as well.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said the yellow. Okay. Yeah, the yellow house, the one out here?
That one.
Yeah, there. Yeah. So I think the intent long-term with this project, if the project happens the way that it's been envisioned, is to remove that and to provide space inside the building for the programming that's in there. So it would make much more sense if we're talking about opening up this building and having this kind of, well-lit, a lot of glass on that west or on that east side, opening it up to the community to 8th Street, to not have that building sitting right in front of the entrance. So, and that also opens up some better circulation, better parking, and just cleans up your front door. So, because really what we're talking about is creating a new front door for Trinity. And for years, when this building was built, when the church was built, the front door was the west side. And as things change and as needs change, and it's not unique to you guys. I mean, you can look across the river and look at First Lutheran, and they have exactly the same issue there. And they have the same kinds of challenges. They've addressed them in different ways, but that building has a lot of different levels in it, and I'm sure many of you have been in there. But yeah.
One and then you. Choir rooms, the 2 choir rooms that
Yeah.
are down on the lower level, is the plan to keep and renovate, or maybe add a 3rd one with all the choirs that we have? What's the thought?
No, those would go away. They would be removed as part of the removal of that wing. They're sitting right over here. They would go into other space. I mean, we're constructing a lot of multi-use space. Right now, the choirs don't use them. The choir rehearses in the sanctuary. So they get very, very little use right now. Almost no use. They very. Yeah, children's choir. Children's choir is the only thing that's in there. So, and that happens once a week. So it's a very underutilized space.
This might seem kind of wild, but has there been any talk about possibly selling the Dirks building as an offset to this a little bit? I mean, moving the Lost and Found programming over here and just getting rid of that building for the money?
Which building is that yours?
Lost and Found?
Lost and Found.
That whole building, it used to be Dirks Printing?
I think it maybe came up in conversation, but not in, it would be part of probably the whole feasibility discussion on, where we want to go, and what properties. Trinity has a lot of other real estate as well. Yep. But not directly like, let's just sell it, no.
Because I'm sure it would command a price, and it's certainly demanding maintenance figure, I'm sure. I mean, that building has HVAC problems and all the same problems that this building has.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Brian or myself for the building committee? We do have a motion on the floor.
Maybe, can I clarify something about the choir room space?
Yep.
Just again, that those on the 2nd floor, the children's ministry rooms, I think, are envisioned as multi-use spaces. So as part of the facility dream team, we had conversations with other congregations around, and at Hope South in particular, one of the custodians was mentioning about how they don't necessarily have groups that claim rooms in their space. Like that this is not just a Sunday school room, or this is not just a choir room. They don't have things like that, but there are rooms that multiple groups use on a regular basis, and I think that's the kind of the idea behind
The lower
that.
level rooms in below the sanctuary too, the
Sure, yeah.
remodeled spaces. There's those two big rooms down there would certainly be a candidate for those. And if I know that you guys have probably, well, certainly one of the best sanctuary choirs in the region. I mean, and they're awesome. And, you certainly want to maintain that and continue to grow that. If there was a really strong preference to have some dedicated space in that lower level of the sanctuary, down there where we have those two big rooms, we've got that space directly underneath the altar that is, right now it's the kitchen and there's like a meeting room in there, but that might be an opportunity for some space that could be dedicated to that is very well constructed and would be pretty quiet there too, so.
Speaking of the best cathedral choir in the region.
I feel somewhat invited into this conversation. Thank you, Michael Culleton, Cathedral Choir Director. And what I would like to lobby for is at least one dedicated choral rehearsal space. Right now they're underutilized because the rooms are bad for those purposes. If we had good rooms for those purposes, not only would we find use for them here, but it may be a way to bring other organizations into the building. I know of another community-based choir that loves singing at Trinity. In fact, I know two other community-based choirs that love singing at Trinity that I think would find great use in a dedicated choir space, but would not really consider, nor would I consider using a space like a multi-use space for cathedral choir rehearsals. We rehearse in the balcony for practical purposes, and it's a wonderful spot to be. But I would be maybe the first person to lobby for what you're talking about with a dedicated space for the great music making that we can do. Thank you.
That can absolutely happen. I think there's certainly space available for that, especially in that lower level.
Shar asked, where would the main office be or the front office be?
So that when people come in visitors here on a daily basis, there would be a lower level administrative kind of a hub there on that main level, right in the gathering space. So that would be where you would have your receptionist presence, and they would direct people. Basically, that window would be right here. They would direct people to go up these stairs, and when you go up those stairs, the main office where all of the other office functions are, the administrative functions, would be right the first thing that you see when you come up those stairs. So it'd be very easy. Wayfinding would be very simple. As the receptionist, you would just say, just turn around and go up those stairs, and the first door that you see is going to be the door you go in. So I think that just by necessity, there's only so much main level available here, and the things that have to be on the main level, the committee kind of decided if we're going to have the preschool, that has to be there, fellowship has to be there, kitchen has to be there. We need some administrative presence there, but we don't necessarily need everybody in that spot. So.
Kay Heydrich, preschool director. I feel it would be really weird if I didn't say anything when you're talking such a large chunk of space for the preschool. I just, like Eric over there, am super jazzed about all the prospects that this allows the preschool to do. Many of the functional rooms, that are the rooms that we have there, are really, like Michael said, us trying to fit in programming into rooms that are strangely the wrong size for them. One thing that our program has to do is have little tiny groups of 10 kids in one room because licensing does not allow them to be any bigger than that. So you have one staff. And when you have children that have challenging behaviors, as they are getting more challenging as we go along, I don't know if you've been in any community groups, you just kind of notice that with kids. Having a room that's large enough to have 2 teachers that can team teach and can co-direct and do different things is really part of preschool programming. And the preschool has been around since '69 because of Trinity Lutheran Church. And there doesn't go a day go by that somebody gives me on the phone or calls me on the phone and says, "We've just heard Trinity is one of the best places around." And that is because you support us. I'm super excited that with this we would be able to maybe look at some different age groups that we are not serving right now, which is a huge community need. And I know in the community, when you're talking economic development and people not being able to find childcare in the community, it's a big issue. So you are supporting the community of Fargo-Moorhead as well, allowing the preschool to thrive and survive. So I just thought it'd be too weird for me to sit here talking silent. Anybody knows that's pretty weird for me anyways. But to be silent and not say thank you for considering this. I know what a big deal it is to allocate that much space for us, but our mission can only get bigger and better and more developed through the use of this space. So I just wanted to thank you.
I just wondered the number of families that we're serving through the preschool.
Currently, Trinity is licensed for 97 or 98 children. I have to look. I changed my enrollment because of my toddler program, kids aging out. But that is how many children we are licensed to serve, is 97, 98 children. So we have 7 classrooms.
So do you know how many more kids you'd be able to accept with this new expansion?
One thing that I'm excited to explore right now is the addition of infant care, which we haven't had, mainly because of space. And so that's one room that we're looking at, the possibility of it starting out with perhaps 8 infants and moving up to 12 infants at the end of time. So in addition, then we may be able to serve more 3-year-olds too, which is the bulk of my waiting list right now is 3-year-olds. That's a common time that people look at to get the kids into early education. And I do say that Trinity is in the process of educating kids and getting them kindergarten ready. That's part of our parent-aware 4-star rating. So I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but yes, we will be able to serve more children in the fact that we are looking at the addition of infant care. So.
Okay, are there any other relevant discussions to the motion?
For the preschool, how many of the students are the families that are members of Trinity?
You know what, there needs to be better tracking as far as knowing what that number is. They don't all share that information with me like I belong to Trinity or I belong there. Over the years, there's been a number of, just looking at the faces in the room here, I've had many, many, many of the children here, and some of them came to Trinity that way. Some of them chose the preschool because they were Trinity members and they heard we had a preschool. I think that connection, being on the main floor like that, is going to be much better because we are kind of hidden in the basement. I've made some real intentional efforts to connect with the community, but I think that you know, I'd have to take a look at the current enrollment right now. We do ask people, but they don't always supply that information. So.
I don't have an exact number, but a significant portion of our new member families with children and our baptisms have come through the preschool.
Good evening, I'm Kurt Casper. In the interest of time, I'd like to call the vote on the question.
Thank you, Kurt. Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor of, maybe I can put that back up there. Do we need that? To hire a capital campaign consultant to conduct a financial assessment for our congregation paid for by a grant from our foundation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Thank you very much. Well, I'm excited that there were so many questions, and I know the night is getting long, but so much work has been done, and it's so good to see you guys all engaged in asking detailed questions. But really, our next step is, is this feasible? Can we do it? So, thank you for that motion, and